At 7:45 a.m. on February 21st, 1945, electrician's mate second-class Joseph Kessel crouched inside the steel belly of an M4A3 Sherman tank as it crawled forward across the black volcanic ash of Iwo Jima. The engine roared inches from his ears. The hull vibrated beneath his boots. His hands rested on a cluster of switches and wiring he had personally installed 3 months earlier at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Kessel was 24 years old, a Navy Seabee from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion. He had spent more than 1,200 hours turning this tank into a weapon the Marine Corps had never fielded before. He had done it for one reason. Portable flamethrower operators on Iwo Jima were dying at a 92% casualty rate. 200 yards ahead, a Japanese reinforced concrete pillbox, camouflaged into volcanic rock, concealed a Type 92 heavy machine gun. It had already killed 11 Marines that morning. Every assault against it had failed. The mathematics of death on Iwo Jima were merciless. A portable flamethrower weighed nearly 100 pounds. It carried 7 seconds of fuel. Japanese snipers identified operators instantly by the twin tanks on their backs. Most were shot before they reached effective range. Those who survived long enough to fire rarely lived to reload. This was D+2. The landings had begun on February 19th. More than 70,000 Marines had come ashore onto beaches of crushed volcanic stone. Waiting for them were 22,000 Japanese defenders, hidden inside 11 miles of tunnels, 750 fortified positions, and countless caves carved into the island's core. Naval bombardment had shattered the surface, but done almost nothing below it. Artillery rounds bounced off steel doors. Small arms fire was useless against reinforced concrete 3 feet thick. The Marines needed a way to burn the enemy out, without sacrificing the men carrying the flame. The solution had begun thousands of miles away. At Schofield Barracks, Colonel Unmacked of the Army Chemical Warfare Service assembled a top-secret composite unit. In May 1944, 25 Seabees from the 117th joined Army chemical specialists and Marine tank crews. Their mission was simple and dangerous. Take the flamethrower off the Marine's back. Put it on a tank. Early attempts failed. Modified M3 Stuart Satan tanks using Canadian Ronson flamethrowers lacked armor and range. Against Iwo Jima's defenses, they would be death traps. So the team escalated. They selected 8 M4A3 Sherman medium tanks, heavily armored, reliable, capable of absorbing punishment. Under the direction of machinists mate First Class A, Reich, and Kessel, the Seabees combined 3 separate flame systems into a single weapon they designated CB-H1. Each installation required 150 pounds of welding rod, hundreds of feet of wiring, and thousands of electrical connections. Each conversion cost $25,000, a staggering sum for an experimental weapon. The system operated at 300 pounds per square inch, projecting a stream of burning fuel up to 400 feet, with 270 degrees of traverse. Kessel wired every circuit himself. He tested every connection again and again. He knew that if one wire failed, Marines would die. By November 1944, the 8 tanks were complete. Now, on the slopes of Iwo Jima, one of them was rolling toward a bunker that had already taken 11 lives. And Joseph Kessel was inside it, trusting his work, trusting the steel, and about to find out whether the weapon he helped build would change the battle, or become just another burning wreck on black sand. The Marine Corps called them Mark I flame tanks. Army paperwork listed them as POA, CWS, H1. Their official designation was M4A3R5. The Marines had a simpler name, Zippos. 8 of the modified Shermans were loaded onto transports in early February 1945. They sailed west across the Pacific toward Iwo Jima, carrying a weapon no one had ever used in combat before. Joseph Kessel and shipfitter First Class J.T. Patterson were ordered to go with them, not as crewmen, as insurance. If something failed in battle, no one else knew how to fix it. And if repairs took too long, Marines would die waiting behind burning steel. Kessel understood exactly what he had built and exactly what was at stake. The questions followed him across the ocean. Would the CB-H1 survive combat? Would Marines trust a flame tank leading the assault? Could 8 machines make a difference against 22,000 entrenched defenders? The Zippos came ashore on D-Day, but they stayed silent. Marine commanders were cautious. Untested weapons had a way of becoming liabilities under fire. For 2 days, infantry and conventional tanks tried, and failed, to break Japanese defenses dug deep into volcanic rock. By February 21st, D+2, the assault had stalled. A fortified Japanese position had held for 48 hours. It commanded open ground with overlapping fields of fire. 15 Marines were already dead. Every infantry squad that approached closer than 70 yards had been cut down. The 4th Marine Division requested a flame tank. Kessel climbed into the assistant driver's seat of the lead Sherman. He had built this weapon. Now he would find out if it worked. The tank lurched forward, gears grinding as it advanced at 8 miles per hour across black ash and shattered stone. Mortar rounds whistled overhead. Shrapnel clattered against the hull. Inside the tank, Kessel watched the pressure gauge settle. 300 pounds per square inch. The fuel tanks held 290 gallons of thickened napalm. The ignition system, his design, used a waterproof rotating cylinder, each chamber housing a match head like a revolver. He had tested it 40 times at Schofield Barracks. It had never failed. At 150 yards, Japanese machine gun fire struck the Sherman. Bullets rang sharply against steel armor. The tank did not slow. At 100 yards, the driver halted and pivoted the hull. The firing slit came into view. Through the periscope, Kessel saw the dark rectangle of the pillbox opening. A Type 92 machine gun barrel protruded from the concrete. He aligned the nozzle and pulled the trigger. The ignition snapped. Pressurized fuel surged forward. A river of fire erupted from the Sherman's former 75mm gun mount, arcing through the air. For 100 feet of flame. 3 seconds. The burning napalm slammed into the bunker and poured through the firing slit. Smoke burst from every opening. Heat pressure built instantly inside the concrete chamber. The machine gun fell silent. Kessel held the trigger for 5 seconds, then released it. The flame cut off. The bunker continued to burn. No shots followed. No movement. No survivors. The Marines advanced behind the Zippo. For the first time on Iwo Jima, a fortified position had been neutralized without sacrificing the men meant to carry the flame. And the battle had just learned what the Zippos could do. The Japanese defenders inside the bunker were dead. What 2 days of infantry assaults and 15 Marine casualties had failed to accomplish, the CB-H1 had done in 5 seconds. The Sherman reversed away from the smoking pillbox. Marines who had been pinned down behind rock and shell craters rose from cover and moved forward. For the first time since landing, the ground in front of them was silent. A platoon leader keyed his radio. The pillbox was destroyed. Request another flame tank immediately. When the Sherman reached the rally point, Joseph Kessel climbed out through the hatch. J.T. Patterson was already inspecting the system. They checked wiring junctions, fuel lines, pressure seals. Everything was intact. No electrical faults. No leaks. Pressure steady. The weapon had performed exactly as designed. Both CBs understood what that meant. The CB-H1 worked in combat. It could destroy fortified positions that artillery, infantry, and conventional tanks could not touch. And it did it without forcing a Marine to cross open ground carrying 100 pounds of fuel on his back. That afternoon, 3 more Zippos went forward. Each one destroyed multiple pillboxes and sealed cave entrances. Each attack succeeded, and not a single Marine was lost to sniper fire while a flame tank was in action. It changed the rhythm of the battlefield. By nightfall on February 21st, Marine commanders were requesting flame tanks for every major assault. Radios crackled with urgent calls. Battalion staff officers adjusted plans in real time. But the problem was simple arithmetic. 8 tanks. Per division. 750 fortifications. 11 miles of tunnels. Demand far outpaced supply. That night, Kessel worked by flashlight and memory. He checked wiring harnesses, tested ignition cylinders, inspected fuel valves. Volcanic dust coated everything. Salt air corroded contacts. Mortar fragments rattled against hulls nearby. He knew dawn would bring more missions, and the flame tanks would be first in line. What Kessel did not yet know was that the Japanese had been watching. Enemy commanders on Iwo Jima understood exactly what had happened. Reports moved through the tunnel network faster than the Marines advanced above it. A new order spread underground. Stop the flame tanks. Target them first. kill the crews. The Zippos were now the most dangerous weapons on the island, and the Japanese intended to destroy them. February 22nd began with mortar fire. Heavy, deliberate fire. Enemy forward observers had identified American refueling and maintenance areas. At 0600 hours, incoming rounds bracketed 2 flame tanks from 5th Marine Division. No direct hits, but the pattern was clear. The Japanese were adjusting. They were learning. Kessel and Patterson worked through the morning, moving from tank to tank, tightening connections, replacing scorched wiring, clearing ash from vents. 8 flame tanks, all of them operational. For now, the CB-H1 systems demanded constant attention. Electrical connections vibrated loose as the Shermans lurched across volcanic rock. Fuel pumps had to be inspected after every mission. Ignition cylinders required fresh match cartridges. Nothing about the system was forgiving. Refueling was the most dangerous work of all. Each gallon of thickened napalm had to be hand-pumped into the tanks while crews worked in the open, exposed to sniper fire, mortar bursts, and artillery fragments. A single hit during refueling could turn a flame tank into a funeral pyre. But the work continued. By noon, 4th Marine Division reported their flame tanks had destroyed 18 fortified positions in 3 hours. 5th Marine Division reported similar results. The impact was immediate and unmistakable. Japanese defenders who had held positions for days abandoned them when Zippos appeared. Marines advancing behind the Shermans encountered reduced resistance. Casualties dropped. Momentum returned. But success created a new problem. Demand exploded. Each tank battalion had only 4 flame tanks. They operated from pooled locations, dispatched wherever an assault stalled. Radio requests flooded in continuously. Hilpeter needed a flame tank. A cave complex required 2. A fortified ridgeline had halted an entire battalion. The 8 tanks could not be everywhere. Infantry officers began refusing to advance without flame tank support. They had seen what these weapons could do. They also knew what conventional assaults against reinforced positions cost in lives. Waiting was safer than charging. Joseph Kessel saw this firsthand on February 23rd. A company from 23rd Marines had been pinned down for 6 hours by a cave complex in the northern sector. 3 interconnected caves covered each other with interlocking fire. Every approach was exposed. Artillery had failed. Infantry assaults had failed. 12 Marines were already casualties. Kessel rode in the assistant driver's seat of the Sherman dispatched to the position, eyes fixed on the CB-H1's electrical indicators as the tank advanced at an oblique angle to reduce exposure. At 75 yards, the gunner fired. A 5-second burst sent 400 feet of burning napalm into the first cave entrance. The gunner shifted left. Another 5 seconds. Then the third cave. All 3 entrances became infernos. Smoke poured from the tunnel network. Secondary explosions rippled through the hillside as stored ammunition detonated under the heat. The interconnected system collapsed in moments. Marines advanced and secured the position without additional casualties. The entire engagement lasted 11 minutes and consumed 60 gallons of fuel. What could have cost dozens of lives and hours of fighting ended faster than a briefing. The company commander radioed battalion headquarters. Send more flame tanks. There were none to send. All 8 were already committed. Requests stacked up faster than they could be answered. Japanese defenses stretched for miles, and the Zippos were the only weapons consistently breaking them. By February 25th, the flame tanks had been in continuous operation for 4 days. Kessel worked 18-hour shifts, moving from vehicle to vehicle. Each tank ran 4 to 6 missions per day. Wiring scorched. Valves clogged. Ignition systems fouled by ash. The flame tanks were working exactly as designed. The problem was simple. There were not enough of them. Fuel consumption exploded. By the end of February, the flame tanks had burned through over 5,000 gallons of thickened napalm. At the beach supply depots, CBs worked without pause, mixing fuel, filling jerry cans, loading trucks, and pushing the volatile cargo forward under constant threat of shellfire. The CB-H1 systems were holding up better than anyone had expected. But the island fought back. Salt air crept into electrical connections. Volcanic dust worked its way into switches and relays. Sediment in the napalm mixture clogged fuel pumps. Ignition cylinders, never designed for this level of continuous use, wore out far faster than predicted. Kissel and Patterson adapted. When standard wiring ran out, they stripped telephone wire and rewired critical circuits. When replacement parts were unavailable, they fabricated new ones from damaged tank components. Burned-out assemblies were rebuilt by hand. Nothing was allowed to remain down. All 8 flame tanks stayed operational. The results were undeniable. 5th Marine Division reported 43 fortified positions destroyed in 5 days. 4th Division reported nearly identical numbers. In sectors supported by flame tanks, infantry casualties dropped by 30% compared to areas without them. Marines were advancing faster and losing fewer men. Japanese defenders responded quickly. They concentrated anti-tank fire on flame tanks whenever they appeared. They targeted fuel trucks supplying them. They launched suicide attacks using magnetic charges, attempting to get close enough to disable the Shermans. 3 flame tanks were hit by Japanese anti-tank guns. None were destroyed. The armor held. The CB-H-1 systems survived impacts that would have disabled conventional equipment. On February 27th, Kissel was inside a flame tank when a Type 147mm anti-tank round struck the Sherman's frontal armor at an oblique angle. The shot deflected, but the force slammed Kissel into the interior hull. His shoulder dislocated instantly. Patterson dragged him clear of the tank and forced the joint back into place. Less than 2 hours later, Kissel was back inside another Sherman, repairing electrical systems under fire. What impressed Marine commanders wasn't just the weapon's destructive power. It was reliability. Volcanic ash jammed machine guns. Salt spray corroded radios. Constant vibration loosened bolts and fittings across the battlefield. Engines failed. Weapons seized. The flame tanks kept working. Infantry units adapted their tactics around them. Rifle squads advanced directly behind the Shermans, using the tanks as moving cover. When a flame tank engaged a bunker or cave, infantry surged forward during the chaos, clearing positions before defenders could recover. The coordination worked. Casualties dropped. Momentum increased. Positions that had stalled battalions for days fell in minutes. The Zippos were no longer experimental weapons. They had become the centerpiece of the assault. The statistics were undeniable. In the first 7 days of flame tank operations, Marine divisions advanced at 3 times the projected rate. Casualties caused by fortified positions dropped by 42%. Japanese defenders abandoned bunkers and caves rather than wait for the flame tanks to arrive. Tunnel networks that would normally take weeks to clear were neutralized in days. The battle was changing, but the cost was shifting onto the men inside the tanks. Operating a Sherman was already brutal. The CB-H-1 system made it worse. Pressurized fuel lines, ignition systems, and internal heat buildup turned the tanks into furnaces. Temperatures inside regularly exceeded 120 degrees. Crews worked soaked in sweat, dehydrated, barely able to breathe. Some collapsed at their stations. Kissel watched men pass out inside steel hulls while the tanks were still under fire. He saw loaders pulled unconscious from hatches. Heat exhaustion became as much a threat as enemy weapons. The flame tanks were saving Marine lives. They were also grinding down the crews who operated them. By March 1st, the flame tanks had been in continuous combat for 10 days. Kissel had been on the island for 20 consecutive days, sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night. His shoulder, dislocated days earlier, still hadn't healed. He kept working anyway. Patterson showed clear signs of exhaustion but refused evacuation. They both understood the reality. They were the only men on Iwo Jima who fully understood the CB-H-1 electrical systems. If they were removed, the flame tanks would eventually fail. And when they failed, Marines would die. As the battle intensified, Japanese resistance hardened. In the northern sector, defenders fortified every ridge, ravine, and cave. Volcanic rock provided natural armor. Tunnel systems allowed defenders to disappear and reappear behind advancing Marines. Positions thought cleared came alive again with machine gun fire. Casualties mounted. Progress slowed. 5th Marine Division commanders requested flame tank support for a sector already known by its nickname, the Meat Grinder. 3 fortified positions dominated the area: Hill 362, Turkey Knob, and the amphitheater. Japanese defenders had held the terrain for 9 days. Repeated assaults had failed. Over 800 Marines had been killed or wounded trying to take it. 4 flame tanks were assigned to the assault on Hill 362. Kissel rode with the lead Sherman. He had spent 3 straight days rebuilding its fuel pump and replacing corroded wiring. The CB-H1 system was functioning at peak efficiency. If it failed here, it would fail under the worst possible conditions. The tanks advanced at 0800 hours on March 3rd. Japanese anti-tank fire opened immediately. One Sherman took 3 direct hits on the turret. The armor held. The tanks kept moving. At 100 yards, all 4 flame tanks fired simultaneously. 1,600 feet of flame washed across the hillside. Cave mouths became furnaces. Pillboxes burned. Japanese defenders attempting to escape through tunnel exits ran directly into secondary fires. Ammunition stores detonated underground. The assault lasted 12 minutes. When the flames stopped, Marines advanced and secured Hill 362 with minimal resistance. What had cost 800 casualties over 9 days was resolved in 12 minutes. Turkey Knob fell the same day using identical tactics. The amphitheater took 2 more days, but flame tanks were decisive in both engagements. By March 5th, the meat grinder was secure. 5th Marine Division credited the flame tanks with saving approximately 500 Marine lives in that sector alone. Success brought new pressure. The newly arrived 3rd Marine Division requested flame tank support for operations farther north. But the reality was catching up. The 8 original tanks were reaching their mechanical limits. 2 had damaged fuel pumps. Patterson was struggling to keep alive with improvised parts. Another suffered electrical failures Kissel traced to corrosion he could no longer fully replace. The fleet was operating at 75% capacity. The flame tanks had changed the battle, but they were wearing out. And Marine Corps leadership was beginning to understand that the most effective weapon on Iwo Jima was also the most fragile. The request went out to Schofield Barracks for additional flame tanks and trained personnel. Schofield was 4,000 miles away. Even if production began immediately, even if ships sailed without delay, reinforcements would take weeks. The battle on Iwo Jima would not wait. Kissel understood the arithmetic. 8 tanks, reduced capacity, constant demand. The northern sector still held thousands of Japanese defenders in fortified terrain. The flame tanks had proven decisive, but only if they could stay operational long enough to finish the fight. On March 7th, the Japanese tested that assumption. At 0200 hours, enemy forces launched a rare and coordinated counterattack in the northern sector. Approximately 300 defenders emerged from tunnel networks and struck Marine positions near Katano Point. The attack was sudden and violent. Automatic weapons and grenades tore into forward lines. Marines called for immediate armored support. 2 flame tanks were dispatched in darkness. Night operations were dangerous even under ideal conditions. Visibility was limited. Terrain was unforgiving. Japanese infantry could approach unseen with magnetic mines or satchel charges. But Marine commanders judged the risk acceptable. The flame tanks had already proven what they could do. Kissel rode with one of the tanks. He took the assistant driver's position, monitoring CB-H1 electrical systems by flashlight as the Sherman crawled forward. Radio directions guided them through the darkness. The tank moved slowly, deliberately. At 300 yards, Japanese troops attacked the tank directly. Small arms fire struck the hull from multiple directions. Something heavy hit the turret, likely a satchel charge that failed to detonate. The driver did not stop. Kissel checked the pressure gauge. Operational. Ignition system active. At 150 yards, the gunner fired. The night exploded into light. 400 feet of burning napalm swept across the hillside where Japanese forces had assembled. Men caught in the open had nowhere to run. The effect was immediate and devastating. The counterattack collapsed within minutes. The second flame tank arrived and completed the sweep. By dawn on March 8th, the sector was secure. Marines counted 187 Japanese dead. Marine casualties totaled 23, far lower than expected for a night engagement of that scale. The flame tanks had stopped an attack that could have pushed Marine lines back significantly. But the overnight operation exposed serious problems. Electrical components overheated during extended firing. Fuel pumps showed signs of strain. Wiring shaken loose during night movement caused intermittent ignition delays. The CB-H1 systems were being pushed beyond their design limits. The flame tanks had won the fight, but they were wearing down. And Kissel knew the next failure wouldn't be theoretical. It would happen under fire, with Marines waiting behind steel hulls that might not flame when they needed them to. The strain finally showed. One flame tank suffered multiple electrical failures during the night engagement. Corrosion had eaten through key connections. Kissel spent 6 straight hours tracing faults inside the cramped hull, replacing damaged wiring by flashlight. A second tank faced a more serious problem. Its fuel pump was failing completely. Patterson worked through the day scavenging parts from disabled conventional Shermans, trying to rebuild the system with whatever could be salvaged. By nightfall, only 6 of the original 8 flame tanks remained operational. March 10th brought another threat: logistics. 5th Marine Division reported fuel consumption had reached 10,000 gallons of napalm mixture per day. The beach supply depot struggled to keep up. Production fell behind demand. Fuel shortages forced commanders to ration usage. Each flame tank was limited to 3 missions per day instead of 6. Effectiveness dropped accordingly. The human cost was mounting. Kissel had been in combat 26 consecutive days. Sleep was minimal. Nutrition was poor. His dislocated shoulder caused constant pain. Patterson collapsed from severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. A Navy corpsman ordered him off duty for 24 hours. That left Kissel alone. On March 11th, he maintained every operational flame tank by himself, moving from position to position, repairing electrical systems, checking fuel lines, replacing ignition cylinders. His hands bled from cuts caused by jagged metal inside the Shermans. His uniform was soaked with sweat, fuel, and hydraulic fluid. He did not stop. Marine commanders watching the 24-year-old electrician understood something essential. These tanks were not just machines. They were sustained by human endurance. Kissel had built them. He maintained them. He fought in them. His refusal to quit kept them in action, but even determination had limits. The battle entered its 4th week. Japanese defenders still held strong positions across the northern sector. The question was whether Kissel and the flame tanks could last. On March 12th, relief finally arrived. Reinforcements from Schofield Barracks landed. Not additional tanks, but replacement parts and 3 trained technicians familiar with the CB-H1 systems. Patterson recovered enough to return to limited duty. For the first time in weeks, Kissel had help. Operational tempo stabilized. The final phase of the battle tested everything. Japanese defenders fought from prepared positions with no intention of surrender. Every cave had to be burned. Every tunnel sealed. Every pillbox destroyed. The flame tanks worked continuously. By March 20th, the 8 tanks, some repaired repeatedly, had been in operation for 28 days. They conducted over 240 missions, destroyed an estimated 370 fortified positions, and consumed more than 140,000 gallons of napalm fuel. Not a single flame tank had been lost to enemy action. Not one crewman had been killed operating them. The comparison to portable flamethrowers was brutal. Marine units using M2-2 flamethrowers suffered casualty rates as high as 92%. Flame tank crews suffered approximately 12%, mostly from shrapnel and concussion. The difference was armor. The difference was design. The difference was Kissel. On March 26, 1945, 36 days after the landings, Admiral Chester Nimitz declared Iwo Jima secure. Japanese resistance had collapsed, and thousands of Marines were alive because a CB electrician refused to let his machines fail. The surviving Japanese defenders withdrew deeper into the cave systems. Many would die underground. Others would emerge weeks later, starving and wounded, long after the battle was officially over. The Marine Corps paid a terrible price for Iwo Jima. 6,821 killed, 19,217 wounded, more than 26,000 casualties. It was the only battle in the Pacific War where American casualties exceeded Japanese. Yet amid the devastation, Marine commanders reached an unmistakable conclusion. The flame tanks had been the most effective weapon on the island. The 4th Tank Battalion reported that the flamethrower tank was probably the most valuable single weapon employed on Iwo Jima. The 5th Marine Division stated it was the most important single weapon available to this division. The 23rd Regimental Combat Team called its employment highly successful and recommended more flame tanks per battalion. One Marine platoon leader expressed it more simply. The infantry would sooner see one flamethrower tank than a dozen tanks with 75s. That statement captured reality. Marines trusted the flame tanks. They waited for them. They followed them forward. And they survived because of them. Joseph Kissel remained on Iwo Jima for 32 days. He accompanied flame tanks on more than 20 combat missions. He maintained electrical systems under fire. He improvised repairs with limited tools. He refused evacuation despite injury, exhaustion, and constant exposure. His determination kept the flame tanks operational through the entire battle. The 8 flame tank crews received Presidential Unit citations with their respective battalions. Patterson received a Navy commendation for his technical work. Kissel received similar recognition. But the most meaningful acknowledgement came from the Marines who fought behind those tanks and lived. After Iwo Jima, the question was no longer whether flame tanks worked. The question was whether they would continue. The Marine Corps did not hesitate. Flame tanks became standard equipment for Pacific operations. For the invasion of Okinawa on April 1, 1945, the entire 713th Tank Battalion converted to flame. 54 tanks, all using systems derived from Kissel's CB-H1 design. CBs from Schofield Barracks supervised the conversions and trained 3 officers and 60 enlisted Marines. Okinawa confirmed everything. Flame tanks operated for 82 days, consuming over 200,000 gallons of napalm fuel. Army commanders reported their psychological impact was decisive. Japanese defenders abandoned positions rather than face them. American infantry preferred advancing behind flame tanks instead of conventional armor. The weapon built at Schofield Barracks in late 1944 became the standard American answer to fortified defenses. Its influence extended beyond World War II. CB-H1 derived flame tanks served in Korea from 1950 to 1953 and remained in service until 1955, when newer models replaced them. For 11 years, Kissel's design shaped American mechanized assault doctrine. The numbers tell the story. Portable flamethrower operators on Iwo Jima suffered 92% casualties. Flame tank crews suffered approximately 12%. Flame tanks destroyed an estimated 370 fortified positions. Casualties in sectors with flame tank support were 42% lower. The 5th Marine Division estimated 500 lives saved in the meat grinder sector alone. Across the island, the total was likely thousands. Joseph Kissel returned to civilian life after the war. He had spent 32 days in combat on Iwo Jima. He had built a weapon that changed how the Marine Corps fought. He had kept it working under fire. He had refused to quit when exhaustion and injury gave him every reason to leave. The legacy is simple and profound. A 24-year-old Navy electrician recognized that portable flamethrowers were killing the men who carried them. He designed a better solution. He built it. He tested it in combat. He maintained it under the worst conditions imaginable. And in doing so, he saved thousands of American lives and reshaped modern warfare.